What happens when the man who built a buffet empire from scratch ends up dragging sauce, stained trays through a crowded dining room just to find out what's broken in his own system? Zane Prescott stood in the back of his black SUV outside the 6th location of his buffet chain. 7 stores total, all in the same state. This one sat near a busy intersection and had opened just under a year ago. It was supposed to be one of the smoother branches, clean numbers, regular foot traffic, decent online reviews. But something in his gut didn't sit right. He had built the entire company from the ground up over the last 12 years, from food truck to full-scale buffet chain. He knew every recipe, every supplier, every inch of the original kitchen. But lately, he felt the distance growing. Spreadsheets didn't tell the full story. One too many vague reports, one too many turnover spikes, so when he pitched the idea of going undercover to his assistant, they set up a plan. New hire. Temporary trainee. No one in this location had met him. Most of the newer staff had only seen his face in a tiny photo on the back of the employee handbook. He dyed his hair a few shades darker, grew out a messy beard, wore old sneakers and a faded delivery shirt. They gave him the name Travis. He walked in through the back entrance at 9:06 a.m., right behind a delivery guy who held the door open. No one paid him any mind. First day? A young woman with curly hair and tired eyes asked, glancing at him while she wrapped silverware. Yeah, Travis, he said, offering a hand. Olivia, she nodded. You're with me on prep. You ever refill hot trays before? Only at family parties, Zane said. She laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Hope that family paid you minimum wage. Kitchen was chaotic, not because it was packed, but because it was understaffed. Olivia moved fast, covering too many roles at once. Zane watched her answer the phone, restock salad dressings, and refill the fried chicken trays all in under 15 minutes. Where's everybody? He asked between hauling a bin of mashed potatoes. Olivia shrugged. 2 people quit last week. 1 called out today. Manager says we're not allowed to hire more until next month. She wiped her forehead with the inside of her wrist. It's been like this for weeks. Zane's stomach tightened. And nobody's stepped in to help, she snorted. Depends on what you mean by help. District guy shows up twice a month and eats for free. Store manager mostly stays in the office. That manager, Zane hadn't met him before. Name was Darren. Mid-30s, used to work at a fast food joint before joining the company. His resume looked solid, but Zane had learned the hard way that paper didn't show character. Around noon, the place filled up. Sunday lunch rush. Zane was running trays out to the hot bar when he heard coughing behind the sneeze guard, not just a light cough hacking. Hey, Olivia, who's that on soup station? He asked. She looked up from where she was replacing tongs. That's Mia. She's been sick since yesterday. Tried to call off, but Darren said if she didn't show up, she'd lose her hours next week. Zane stared at the girl, maybe 19, skinny, pale, eyes sunken. She was visibly shaking, trying to ladle soup while stifling coughs in her elbow. Customers were watching. He dropped his tray and walked straight to the back. Inside the kitchen, Darren was leaned back in a chair, scrolling through his phone. Hey, Zane said, keeping his voice even. That girl out there, she's clearly sick. Darren barely looked up. Yeah, she's fine. Told her to wear gloves and not cough on the food. She needs to go home. Darren's tone shifted. You the new guy, Travis, right? You don't make those calls. Zane stepped closer. You told her she'd lose her hours if she didn't show up. Darren stood now. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but we're short-staffed and she's not dying. If she clocks out, I'm stuck back there. Not happening. Zane's jaw locked. He nodded slowly, then turned and walked back out. He found Olivia by the drink station. Can you cover soup for 10 minutes? He asked. She blinked. Sure, he went to Mia. Hey, I'll take over here. Go sit down in the back. You look like you're about to pass out. Mia looked startled. I can't. Darren said, I'll talk to him. Just go. He grabbed the ladle from her hand and gently nudged her away. She staggered toward the break room. He stood behind the soup bar, refilling bowls, trying to keep his hands busy. But inside, Zane was boiling, not just at Darren but at himself. How many other branches had he let this happen? How far had he drifted? He looked around. Olivia hustled from table to table, never stopping. A dishwasher named Terry, who hadn't said more than 3 words all morning, was scrubbing trays like his life depended on it. These people were grinding, with no support. No thanks. Zane knew what had to happen, but he wouldn't make a scene here, not yet. By the time the lunch crowd began thinning, Zane's shirt clung to his back. He'd spent the last hour rotating between the carving station and the drink dispensers, watching everything, every corner, every small interaction. He wasn't just looking for inefficiencies anymore. He was watching for human cost. As he returned from dumping a bin of soggy napkins and cracked plates, he found Olivia kneeling with a dustpan near the dessert counter. A child had dropped a slice of cake. The frosting was smeared across the tile. "I'll grab that," he said, bending down. She looked up, eyes glassy. "Thanks, but I've got it." "Take a breath," he said. "You've been going non-stop." "I can't stop," she said quickly. "If something's dirty, Darren calls it a health code risk and docks hours." Zane stood, holding the dustpan. "He threatens your hours for messes. Anything he doesn't like," she said, standing up slowly. "He says the store's barely meeting numbers and we're all replaceable." Zane's jaw tightened. "That true? You think he'd replace you?" She hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "He's fired 3 people in the last 2 months, all young women. 1 for attitude, 1 for being late twice, and the last because she wore a nose ring he didn't like." Zane's stomach turned. "Was that in writing anywhere, the nose ring?" "No," she said. "He just told her it wasn't the image he wanted up front. She was a cashier." He nodded slowly. "What about the others?" "He calls it fit," she said. "Says some people just don't fit his culture." Zane didn't speak for a moment. He watched a couple walk past their table, glancing toward the ice cream machine. "And what's the culture, according to him?" Olivia gave a humorless laugh. "Don't ask questions, don't get sick, don't talk back." Zane set the dustpan down on the counter and walked toward the back of the kitchen. He took a different route this time, slipping past the dish station and into the dry storage room, Darren's usual hiding spot when he didn't want to be seen. Sure enough, the door was ajar. Darren was leaning against a shelf, eating a cornbread muffin. "Busy day," Zane said. Darren looked up, chewing slowly. "You again. Thought I told you to stay in your lane." "You did," Zane said, "but I've been watching how you run this place." Darren raised an eyebrow. "And you're not running it. You're hiding in a closet while your staff covers twice their load." Darren stepped toward him. "You don't know what it takes to keep numbers clean. You think I like this? You think I enjoy dragging a bunch of part-timers through lunch rushes with no budget?" Zane didn't flinch. "Then why aren't you beside them? Why aren't you helping?" "Because I'm the manager," Darren snapped. "I'm not paid to bus tables, I'm paid to keep this place open." Zane met his eyes. "You're not keeping it open, they are," Darren scoffed. "Look, Travis, or whatever your name is, you're not even permanent here. You're a temp trainee. You don't know the first thing about management." Zane didn't respond. He held Darren's stare for a long moment, then turned and walked out. Back in the kitchen, he found Mia sitting on a crate near the mop sink, pale and shivering. She looked up in surprise. "I'm calling someone to drive you home," he said. "You shouldn't be here." "I can't afford to lose those hours," she mumbled. "You won't," Zane said. "Not anymore." She blinked at him, confused. He didn't explain further. By mid-afternoon, the dining room was half empty, but the mess remained. Olivia was scrubbing ketchup from a booth seat when Zane returned from taking out trash bags. "You ever get real breaks?" he asked. "Only if Darren's not around," she said. "Sometimes we clock out and keep working just to eat." He stared at her. "You mean you're off the clock but still working?" She wiped her hands on a damp rag. "Only way to get a meal without losing time." Zane turned away before she could see his face. His hands itched. Not from the cleaning chemicals, from the urge to walk straight into the office, pull up payroll, and see how far this had gone. Instead, he made a quiet call from the stockroom. Not to corporate, not yet. He called Jenna, his operations director, the only person who knew where he was. Send an HR rep to this location, he told her. No warning today. What's going on? Jenna asked. Just do it, Zane said, and send someone from compliance. I want eyes on the cameras, clock logs, and incident reports. Everyone from the last 3 months. He hung up and stepped back onto the floor. An hour later, Darren's tone had shifted sharply. Zane noticed him pacing near the host stand, talking loudly into his phone, then walking briskly to the break room, then back. He was sweating now, visibly uncomfortable. The HR rep arrived at 4:30. Middle-aged woman in a gray blazer, clipboard in hand. She walked in through the front and asked for Darren by name. Zane watched the exchange from the salad bar. Darren's face turned crimson. He gestured toward the office, clearly trying to steer her away from the floor. It didn't work. She asked to speak with the staff first. Within minutes, she was interviewing Olivia near the drink station. Then Mia. Then the dishwasher, Terry. Zane stayed out of sight, watching. At 5:15, the rep stepped into the kitchen and asked to speak to Zane privately. They stepped into the storage room. She looked him over. Mr. Prescott, she said quietly, you should know we've already found multiple violations. Off-the-clock labor, threats of hour reduction, and discriminatory firing practices. Zane nodded once. Anything else? There's a pattern of retaliation, she said. Anyone who speaks up gets docked. Terminate him, Zane said. She didn't hesitate. Effective immediately? Yes, I'll handle the rest. When he stepped back onto the kitchen floor, Darren was standing by the back exit. 2 security staff from corporate brought by the rep were flanking him. He looked stunned, eyes darting from face to face as if trying to make sense of it. Zane walked up. You want to explain this? Darren asked, voice rising. Some temp gets me fired, Zane shook his head. No, your own actions did. You just didn't think anyone would notice. Darren stared at him. Who the hell are you? Zane looked him in the eye. I'm the guy who built this company, and I just watched you run it into the ground. Darren's mouth opened, but no sound came. He turned and walked out, flanked by security. The floor was silent. Olivia, Mia, and the others had gathered near the dish station, watching. Zane stepped forward and pulled the hairnet from his head. My name's Zane Prescott, he said. I started this company in my cousin's garage 12 years ago. And I've spent the last 2 days watching some of the hardest working people I've met hold this place together with no support, no respect, and no protection. Nobody moved. I didn't come here to catch anyone, he said. I came because something felt wrong and I was right. He looked at Olivia. You should have had help. He looked at Mia. You should have been sent home the moment you said you were sick. He looked at Terry, who was wiping his hands on his apron. You shouldn't be invisible. Zane turned to the HR rep. We'll bring in an interim manager. I'll stay until then. Every staff member here will get full pay for today, including breaks. He faced the team again. If any of you want to speak to me directly, I'll be in the office. Door open. Then he walked away, leaving the floor in stunned silence. For the first time all day, nobody was rushing. Nobody was muttering. They were just still. And Zane knew why. For the first time in months, someone had listened. Zane stepped into the office and closed the door behind him, but not all the way. He left it cracked open on purpose, a quiet signal. He wasn't hiding, not anymore. The air in the small room was warm and stale. A box fan rattled in the corner, pushing papers off the edge of the cluttered desk. He moved around the chair Darren had used earlier and sat down. The seat creaked slightly under his weight. On the monitor, the login screen for the store's scheduling software blinked. He didn't touch it yet. Instead, he looked out the window that faced the kitchen door. Olivia had gone back to wiping down the counter by the steam tables. She moved slower now, but not because she'd relaxed. It was the fatigue, the kind people carry deep in their joints after weeks of being expected to do too much for too long. Footsteps approached the office. Zane turned slightly as Mia stepped in. She hesitated just inside the threshold, her face pale but more alert than earlier. You feeling any better? He asked. She nodded once. Still dizzy, but I drank some water. She shifted her weight. I just wanted to say, I didn't expect you to step in like that. You shouldn't have had to expect it, he said. You should have had someone looking out for you already. Mia looked down at her shoes, one lace untied. I almost quit yesterday. I told my mom I couldn't take it anymore, but we need the money, so I showed up. You won't lose pay for today, he said. And if you need time off, you'll get it. Paid, her eyes widened slightly. Really, really, she nodded again, then pulled something from her pocket, a folded slip of paper. Darren wrote me up last week, said I lacked urgency, but I was just trying to walk slow so I wouldn't drop the tray. Zane took the paper. It was a standard write-up form, filled in sloppily with a red pen. No witness signature. No explanation beyond vague language like low energy and non-compliant attitude. This won't stay on your record, he said. We're clearing every one of these. Mia exhaled, a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. Thank you. Go home. Get rest. Someone will call you tomorrow. She nodded and left quietly. Zane stayed seated for a moment longer, then turned to the computer. He logged in using his master credentials. As the dashboard loaded, he scanned the recent schedule data. Shifts were overloaded. Breaks were missing. Several employees had been clocked in for over 6 hours with no documented pause. He pulled up payroll records. Exactly as Olivia had described, there were discrepancies, multiple entries where clock-outs were logged for 30-minute lunches in the middle of continuous activity. The system showed breaks, but security camera timestamps would prove no one ever left the floor. There was no ambiguity. This wasn't mismanagement, it was manipulation. A soft knock interrupted his focus. Olivia stepped in, eyebrows slightly raised. Is now a bad time? Zane gestured to the other chair. Come in. She sat, folding her arms over her apron. That HR rep pulled me aside earlier. Asked if I'd ever seen Darren treat people differently based on how they looked. Had you? She hesitated. Yeah, a few times, mostly with younger women. Especially if they didn't flirt back or didn't fit his idea of polished. He said once that Mia looked like she was always sick and that it made customers lose their appetite. Zane's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Did you report it? Olivia shook her head. No point. He was close with the regional manager. They used to work together. Any complaint would have gone straight to him. Not anymore, Zane said. The regional's been reassigned. We're restructuring oversight. Compliance will report directly to headquarters from now on. She blinked. You're serious? Dead serious. She stared at the desk for a second. There's something else. He used to tell the dishwashers not to speak English around customers. Zane looked up. He said that? Yeah, 2 of them speak Spanish as their first language. He claimed customers might feel uncomfortable if they heard them talking and didn't understand. He stood. That kind of discrimination doesn't get a second chance, he said. We'll be issuing a formal report, and we'll be offering those employees proper apologies publicly. Olivia looked down. They won't believe it until they hear it from someone in charge. Then they'll hear it from me. He stepped out of the office with Olivia behind him. The rest of the staff had gathered near the prep table in the back. Word had clearly spread that something significant was happening. Zane raised his voice slightly without shouting. I need everyone's attention for a few minutes. Terry glanced up from the sink, wiping his hands on a towel. A young man with a short beard and a bandana stepped away from the walk-in cooler. Another woman from the dessert station leaned against a crate, arms crossed. Zane looked at each of them. I've just been made aware of discriminatory treatment that some of you experienced here, specifically being told not to speak your native language around customers. That is not only unacceptable, it's illegal. No one interrupted. All eyes stayed on him. To be clear, this company welcomes every language, every background, and every culture. Anyone who tells you otherwise does not speak for this business. They've lost that right. He paused, letting the words land. If you were ever targeted, ignored, or disrespected because of who you are, I want to hear about it. Personally, you will not be punished. You will not be ignored. The man in the bandana nodded slowly. He used to call us the back wall crew, said we weren't front of house material. Zane turned toward him. What's your name? Lewis. You're not the back wall, Zane said. You're the backbone, and I'm sorry you were made to feel otherwise. Lewis nodded again, quieter this time. Thanks, Zane turned to the group. We're making changes, effective now. We'll be bringing in a temporary manager by tomorrow morning. Until then, I'll be here with you. I'll help on the line, clean tables, whatever's needed. A few glanced at each other, uncertain. Olivia stepped closer. Can we make one request? Of course. Can we close early tonight, just once? Everyone's exhausted. Zane looked at the clock. It was just after 6. Yes, he said. Close at 7, paid through 9. That got a reaction. Lewis let out a quiet damn. Another woman muttered finally under her breath. Zane didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just nodded once and stepped back toward the office. As he passed the dining room, he saw a mother with 2 children finishing their meal. One of the little girls dropped her spoon. Olivia was already moving toward them, but Zane beat her to it. He crouched, picked it up, and handed it back with a warm smile. You doing okay? He asked the child. She nodded shyly. Good. Keep being awesome, he said, then stood and turned back toward the kitchen. There were no shortcuts to fixing what he'd seen. No overnight solution. But under that roof in that moment, something had shifted, not because of a speech, not because of a title, because he finally showed up. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front doors were locked. The overhead lights in the dining area dimmed, slightly a sign to the last few customers that the crew was done for the day. Most understood. One family offered a quiet thank you on their way out. Another left a folded napkin with a handwritten, "You all deserve better," at their empty table. The kitchen, thick with leftover steam and the scent of warm bread, had gone quiet. Not from exhaustion, though, that still lingered, but from something else. Uncertainty, maybe. The kind that comes after a storm when the sky clears, but the ground still soaked. Zane rolled up his sleeves and stood by the dry storage room, watching as the team moved through cleanup. He wasn't giving direction. He knew better than to insert himself into routines they'd memorized through repetition and necessity. Instead, he just stayed close, available. Olivia was finishing up at the soda fountain, rinsing out the nozzles. Her shoulders hunched forward more than before, but not from fatigue this time. Zane recognized the posture. It was the quiet armor of someone trying not to get their hopes up too fast. He stepped beside her and spoke just above the hum of the fridge. "Feels different in here tonight." She didn't look at him right away. "Yeah. Still not sure what tomorrow's gonna look like. You'll have a different manager. For now, it's someone from our training division. Her name's Patris. Tough but fair. She doesn't tolerate games." Olivia nodded slowly. "Someone like that might stay longer." "She's not temporary," Zane said. "She's here to evaluate what kind of leadership this team needs long-term, and I'm not rushing that decision." Olivia finally turned to face him. "What about the people who left? The ones who quit or got pushed out? We're reaching out to each of them." "Mia gave me a list of names before she left earlier. If any want to come back, they'll be welcomed." A pause passed between them. "I don't know if they'll trust it," she said. "They shouldn't yet," Zane replied. "Not until we show them things are actually changing." She gave a small nod and continued cleaning. Across the kitchen, Lewis was removing the grates from the grill for a deep scrub. Zane walked over, grabbed a second brush, and knelt beside him. Lewis gave him a sideways glance, not surprised but still a little skeptical. "I thought CEOs didn't touch grease traps," he said. "Usually we don't," Zane said, scraping at a caked corner. "But usually we don't spend years in our offices assuming everything's fine just because the numbers look right." Lewis didn't reply immediately. After a few seconds, he said, "You know, I used to work at a hotel kitchen. Big place. Management walked through once a month, nodded, and left. Never learned a single name. You ever think about going back?" "Nah, I like this team. Even when it's rough, we've got each other. Just wish we weren't always waiting for the next bad thing." Zane set down the brush. "No one should have to work like that. I can't promise this place becomes perfect overnight, but I can promise we're done pretending." Lewis looked at him, then nodded once and returned to scrubbing. Zane stood, brushed off his hands and made his way toward the office. He passed the dessert station, where an older woman named Denise was quietly wrapping leftover pastries in plastic. He stopped. "You've been here a while, haven't you?" She glanced up. 6 years. Since before this location even opened. Helped train 3 of the last managers. None of them still here. "Nope," she said, tying off a roll. "They either got promoted or quit. Darren was the first one who didn't ask anyone what was actually working before changing everything." Zane leaned against the counter. "What would you change if you could?" Denise thought for a moment. "I'd start by giving the closing staff enough hours to clean without rushing. We're always fighting the clock, and I'd bring back shift leads. We used to have one on every crew. Someone experienced, not just whoever was loudest." "That second one's easy," Zane said. "We'll reinstate lead roles this week, and they'll come with a raise." Denise's expression didn't soften, but her hands paused. "And the first one?" she asked. "We'll budget night shifts for longer prep and cleanup. No more racing the clock." She nodded and went back to wrapping. Zane stepped into the office and dialed Jenna. She answered on the first ring. "Status?" she asked. "We're closing the store for 2 days, full pay for everyone." "They need a reset." "Understood," she said. "What about corporate messaging? Keep it internal for now. This isn't for PR, it's for them." He hung up and returned to the floor. "Can I get everyone in the dining room for a minute?" he called out. They trickled in slowly, some wiping hands on aprons, others finishing up tasks on their way. Once everyone was present, Zane stood by the buffet counter facing the group. "I want to say something before you all head out, and I'll keep it short." No one interrupted. "You've been carrying a broken system. You've worked through unfair schedules, ignored illnesses, and held your heads up when no one bothered to ask how things were going. That ends tonight." He looked around the room. "We're closing this location for the next 2 days. You'll all be paid. Use the time however you need. Rest, reset, come back ready to be part of building something better." He let the words settle. "Some of you might not trust this yet, that's fair, but give us time and you'll see change, not just in words but in how we treat people." Lewis raised a hand slightly. "And if it doesn't change, then I'll be back here again," Zane said. "Not as a visitor, as someone responsible." No one applauded. That wasn't the kind of moment this was, but no one looked away either. He stepped back, gave a small nod, and let them return to their work. They finished closing silently but with more ease than any previous shift. There was no manager barking orders, no clock being watched, just people working side by side, knowing for the first time in a long time that someone had listened, and someone was staying to see it through. As the last lights were shut off and the back door clicked closed behind them, Zane remained in the dining room, alone. He sat at a booth near the window, the same one where a child had dropped her spoon earlier. He looked around at the chairs, the trays, the empty buffet line. The numbers would take time to recover, the trust even longer, but the rot had been exposed, and the people who mattered most had been seen. He pulled out his phone and opened the employee handbook file. By morning, it would be rewritten.